G'day, I'm Brian Medway, James Bond. I'm from Grace, Canberra, and these are some videos that we're doing to help as an added resource for this book, Training Trainers, Multiplying Generations of Disciples. This has been happening around the world, everywhere where there is radical expansion of the number of disciples, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, not with great meetings, not with a few people who are incredibly gifted, but with a lot of people who simply receive training and have a heart to serve and obey Jesus Christ as an expression of faith. Faith always begins with obedience. Obedience is always the first step of faith. So we hear something that Jesus says, we respond with obedience, and the obedience is an expression of our faith. It is an expression of our merit. We're not just doing it because it's our duty, we're doing it because we want what Jesus said outside of us to be transforming the inside of us. So the word of command becomes the word of our testimony. That's another way of talking about transformation. And I want to take up an issue today with you in this session 12 that is this page here. There you go. Where are you? There. People to share the gospel with and people to train. We should have done this a long time ago, I think, because this is, quite foundational to the whole thing. And when we did in a previous session the 9 characteristics that always happen if there's a radically advancing discipleship multiplication movement, one of the things is it always involves prayer. Always starts with amazing prayer. And the amazing thing about the prayer is it's not people just praying and praying and praying. It's people praying for people they know who they want to share the gospel with. Praying for people who are not connected to Jesus but in my sphere. That's an amazing kind of prayer meeting. I've hardly been to any prayer meetings like that. I've never been to a prayer meeting where all they did was pray for people who were lost from God. So, that's why it's amazing. Amazing prayer. Founded in prayer, based on the Word of God. And the abundant sowing of seed. So, the abundant sowing of seed is the fact that, we're going to do a session next session, about finding the man of peace. And the way to find a man of peace, you don't know what a man of peace is, maybe it's taken from Luke 10 and Mark 10, maybe Matthew 10 and Luke 10. Anyway, the idea is that we're not responsible for everybody responding to the gospel. We're responsible to proclaim the gospel. They can't hear unless somebody goes, and somebody can't go unless they're sent. So it's always out from here, out from here, out from here. And the church is a sending agency, so we think a church is like a missions organisation. In fact, that's all it should have been. We shouldn't have had missions organisations, we should have just had churches. And I think every missions organisation is a church. I know missions organisations don't like that because they want to rely on money from churches who don't send people. So anyway, that's another issue for another day. I want to talk about the fact that, I'll just explain this. See, when Jesus told the parable of the seed falling on different kinds of ground, we call it the parable of the sower. He talked about the seed being the message of the kingdom. And this message was to be proclaimed everywhere. And without wanting to get into the technical details of farming and ask why, in our experience of farming, a farmer would sow seed on the road. Like I was a farmer, I used to be a farmer, and I sowed lots of acres of seed for crop. On not one occasion, not once, did I sow on the roadway. We had roadways going through paddocks. I didn't sow on the roadway. So it always was a bit of a mystery to me as what kind of a farmer would be sowing on the roadway. And we actually went around the rocks. We left rocky little outcrops. We didn't sow where they were. But that's because our way of doing it is different. The way they used to sow seed in the first century was to, first of all, throw the seed everywhere on the ground and then scratch the seed into the soil. And so we prepare the soil, we plough it, then we harrow it, then we scarify it, then we pick rocks off it, and then we sow the seed, and then we some months later we reap the harvest. So in those days they used to do it quite the opposite. So you'd sow the seed, and the pathway was simply where people walked across the field. It wasn't actually a roadway, it was actually where people walked. It was trodden down a bit. And so surely between the time when this farmer threw out his seed and scratched it all into the ground with maybe a donkey or something like that, then, or just by some sort of manual means himself, there would be birds that would come and pick up the seed from the pathway. And the rocky places were really rocks that were beneath the soil, that is, soil that was shallow. And the thistles and thorns, well, I don't know whether you know much about thistles and thorns, but thistles and thorns come out not every year. They come out in spasms. You can have no thistles for a number of years, and then you can have thistles. So this is how it worked. It just was sown like that. So the idea is then that the seed declares the ground. The seed declares the ground. So you can't tell what kind of ground it is until you put the seed in the soil. So if the seed is the sharing of the message, then it means the message needs to be shared with everybody. We need to find a way of sharing the message with everybody. We have all these really pathetic, religious, super spiro kind of ways of doing things, where we say, I only go to the people the Lord leads me. Well, where in the ministry of Jesus do you find that? Where do you find Jesus waiting for God to lead him to somebody? I don't think so. If there was 5,000, he fed 5,000. If there was 100 sick people, he prayed for 100 sick people, or healed 100 sick people. If there was 25 demon-possessed people, then he cast demons out of 25 people. So, this is all claptrap that we've invented to try and, make us feel better. Just because we're selfish and afraid. And both those things don't have a good mention in the Bible, by the way. So we've got to allow the seed to find the soil. And I can tell you from just my own limited experience, and I'm not a world beater at this, I am definitely better than I used to be, but I can tell you from my experience that you could be surprised at who would respond. You'd be surprised. You don't know. You don't know whose heart is shallow or whose cares of this world or whatever else. You don't know who's not going to want understanding. Okay, so you've got to sow for everybody. So that's why we've got here a place for you to write down 30 names. 30 names of people. Just write them down. 30 names of people who are within your spheres, domestic sphere, workplace sphere, neighbourhood sphere, community group sphere, or extended family sphere, and put those names in there and start to pray for them. Start to pray that God would give you the way, the means, the courage, the wisdom, the love to be able to impart the gospel to them in some way, so that you don't have the responsibility after that. You just got to watch after that. So that's why you write down 30 names. I reckon you ought to write down, this is just a start, I reckon you write down the name of every person. And when you see somebody, when you find somebody new, somebody moves into your workplace, write their names down as well. These are the people. We figured out that, just in our church, by doing some surveys years ago, that we had 10 to 15,000 people that we knew who needed the gospel. Just the people in our church. People who lived where they lived, or people in their extended families, and people that they worked with, people, whatever. So, it's just important for us to focus this way. And because we focus on every latest spiritual fad, we just miss the core things. Now, the second thing to write down there, as you can see, is people to train. People to train. So the idea is that around you there are people who, if they're encouraged and if they're given an opportunity, they would love to be trained in these things in this book. So you can say, hey, listen, I've been learning how to do some things. Can I help you? Would you like, you don't have to say, I'm the trainer, I'm the boss. You do what you're told. Or you don't have to be all arrogant and rubbishy about it. All you need to do is get with somebody and say, hey, listen, I've been learning some things that have helped me to overcome some of my disabilities, spiritual disabilities. That's what we are. We're a spiritual. We help disabled spiritual people. So get the list. Start to work on the list. Just work through the list, and God will honour you and bless you, and He'll make you better at it.